Welcome to the Calder Farmstead, your place for news, analysis, and shenanigans from the American Hockey League.
Face off one by the Condors. Jones top. Another point fence into the slot. A shot is gone! Josh Perry in double.
Left point long drive. Save Kinetic. What a stop by Matisse with the left pad. Oh, there was a scramble in front of the net. Denied was Matt Schicker by a miraculous piece of net binding by Matisse Kinetic.
D-laner from the red line sends it in. Hofer into his net. He stops it. Hofer looking. Hofer firing toward the empty net. He scores! Are you kidding me? Joel Hofer, a goalie goal in the Calder Cup playoffs.
And now, with 9 minutes gone in overtime, the Bears breaking out. Right side with Fair. Brooks Light cutting to the net. Fair and let's go! He scored! He scored! It's over!
Hello and greetings from the mile-high city of Denver, Colorado.
And Charlotte, North Carolina.
All right. Welcome to the Calder Farmstead Podcast, episode number 112, for Tuesday, October 11th, 2022. If you're hoping for a podcast featuring tips on greasing your shed or barn, we are not going to be much help. This is an American Hockey League podcast, and my name is CC Hockley, the AHL editor of Full Press Hockey.
And I am Sean O'Brien from Stats Track and the AHL's only league-wide analytics guy.
And as always, we thank you all for tuning in with us.
And if you're new to hearing CC and I talk about hockey, we're going to preview the AHL's Atlantic Division, the whole thing, for the upcoming 22-23 season. We both watch a lot of AHL games and are going to talk about what we see when we watch the film, as well as use some advanced stats to help us break it down. If that's new to you, you might want to head over to our podcast feed or YouTube channel, wherever you're listening to us from, and check out episode 0. It's a short primer on some of the stats we're going to be talking about, as well as how we view what's important on the ice. So if you're newer to some of the more advanced hockey stats terms, like PDO or the point shares model, or newer hockey terms like controlled zone entries, go check that out, so you better be able to pick up what we're putting down. I promise it's not that nerdy or technical. It's only 20 minutes. And let's be honest, you wasted 20 minutes reading about the Republic of Molossia. You'll never get that time back. So next time, why not spend a little more time with us talking hockey?
I just saw that on the outline and I Googled it, and I don't think I wanted to dive any further into that.
That's the right attitude.
But I tell you what I do want to dive into. It's time for season previews. We are less than a week away before the start of the 2022-23 AHL season, and we're gonna start previewing the Atlantic Division, like Sean just said.
One quick note here, because this has been incredibly in flux today. It is currently 7:40 p.m. on October 10th. These are the rosters for these teams to the best of our ability at this date and time, subject to change.
7:40 p.m. Eastern time. No love for the Mountain Time. Apparently, it was Sean today.
But, no, but I'm here in Charlotte, and I mean, the only reason I'm here in Charlotte is because they won the division last year. You win the division, you get to host the division preview. I don't make the rules; I just occasionally follow them.
That is fair. So, all right. Well, so here it is, October 10th. The rosters, as accurate as they can be. We did have to make some amendments, but hang with us. 95% of it was good. So, and as of this recording is good. So let's start, like Sean said, with the Charlotte Checkers. Their 21-22 team record was 42-30. Obviously, like you just said, first place in the Atlantic Division. Their coaching staff, head coach Jordy Kinnear, 170-191 as an AHL head coach. One playoff appearance, 1-1 in an AHL playoff series. Assistant coach Jarrett Stahl, and the other assistant coach is Bobby Sanguinetti.
The additions that they made in the offseason, more or less, Justin Sordiff, Anton Levchi, Riley Bizzo, Jerry Mayhew, Chris Tierney, Cam Morrison, Lane Peterson, Ryan DeZingle, Ethan Keppen, Santu Knonen, Callie Hully, Nathan Steos, Anthony Botetto, Michael Del Zotto, everyone's favorite teammate, and Mac Goodsa, Alex Lyon, and Cam Johnson.
Quite a few additions and not nearly as many subtractions. Ryan Lowen, Cole Schwind, Scott Wilson, Max Zimmer, Garmin Rupsov, and Chase Prisky. And of course, there's also the departures. The Seattle Kraken contracted players are no longer being divvied to Charlotte. They're going to go play in Coachella Valley. These are some of the guys that played in Charlotte last year that were under Seattle contract. Luke Henman, Cole Lind, Max McCormick, Alexander True, Carson Twarnsky, Connor Carrick, Dennis Cholowski, Cale Fleury, Gustav Olofsson, Antoine Bibeau, and Joey Decord. Got to slow down and make sure to get all those pronunciations correct. Sean, let's talk about the forwards core. Who are going to be the top 6 forwards from our perspective in Charlotte this year?
I mean, right off the bat is Jerry Mayhew. He's likely going to be one of Florida's first call-ups when injuries happen, but that's because he's a veteran who plays a well-rounded game. At the AHL level, he has an excellent shot, especially the one-timer, and he's been dangerous on the power play in the bumper position as well as on the half wall. He's an above-average skater and can be useful in the penalty kill and in his own zone. He killed penalties for Iowa in his time there, killed penalties for Lehigh Valley in his time there. But while he's in Charlotte this season, I expect him to be one of the offensive leaders on the team.
All right, and moving on to the next forward, Logan Hutsko. A lot to like about Hutsko's game. You know, he skates well. He can operate effectively at top speed. Solid hockey IQ and playmaking vision as well. And to boot, he's got an NHL caliber shot. All great tools to have in his tool belt. He did struggle with poise under pressure last season. Didn't find soft ice in the home plate area. I'm interested to see what he looks like this season, as he has the tools, as I just lined out for you. But can he put it all together more? Or can he put it together more? That's the big question for him to answer this season.
Chris Tierney was a bit of a surprise send down from Florida, too. He's going to be in Charlotte, and like Jerry Mayhew, is likely on the short list for call-ups. Tierney has shown playmaking abilities at the NHL level, which should easily translate to being a near point per game player in Charlotte. He's primarily pass first, but can still shoot at a respectable level. His biggest weakness, though, is skating. However, given his NHL pedigree, I don't think that holds him back, given the difference in pace and play between the NHL and the AHL. Still, there's a chance that the 500-plus game NHL veteran doesn't take kindly to his AHL assignments. But if he does set out to prove that he does not belong in the AHL, he could light it up in Charlotte and provide a lot of veteran leadership to the Utes.
Next up, Alexei Heponiemi. A better season for Heponiemi last year, but I still have questions for him as a prospect. His skating is coming along, but it's still around average. He's got great playmaking vision and is a very accurate passer. He still struggles to win battles in tight due to his size and lack of quick feet. He has NHL skills, especially as a playmaker, but he doesn't shoot often enough, and he struggles to drive play and make zone entries. He'd be a good choice for line mates with Dalpe and Hutsko. Dalpe currently called up with the Florida Panthers. Those skill sets look to complement each other well. At least he's got Hutsko to still look forward to playing with, possibly.
Grigory Denisenko was hurt most of last season, which definitely it took some of the luster off him as a prospect, but I still think he's an excellent skater. He has sharp puck skills, especially in tight, as he's able to stick handle in a phone booth. He's an underrated shooter and a pretty accurate passer, but I think my biggest problem with Denisenko, and this is a phrase you'll hear throughout these season previews for the next handful of episodes, is all tools and little toolbox. He struggles to wield that skill set in an effective manner. That's what's limited him to 12 primary points at even strength in 45 AHL games. That's not the stat line you're looking for from a 15th overall pick who's 22 years old. Now, he was hurt last season. His rookie year was only 15 games in the COVID bubble. But he is 22, and he needs to take a leap this season as his runway as a prospect is starting to run out. He has NHL-level raw skills and could be a sneaky sleeper candidate this year if he can put it all together.
Next up, the guy coming over from the Tampa Bay Lightning organization, Mr. Riley Nash. Nash plays a solid game, or solid do-it-all game, rather. Effective in the defensive zone. His skating speed, unfortunately, has waned as he's aged. He makes up for it by processing the game fast and knowing where to be, especially at the AHL level. He's got good hands in tight, and he's a solid shooter at the AHL level. He can beat goalies cleanly from mid-range. I'd expect him in the top 6 to be a threat to score most nights. I also expect him to mentor some of the younger guys on the team, especially those high draft picks that have struggled a bit as a pro. Maybe Denisenko a little bit.
Let's move on to some defenders. There are plenty more forwards we could talk about, but we only have a limited amount of time here. Let's talk about Michael Del Zotto, probably the first defenseman called up for Florida when a veteran is needed. He was one of the best defensemen in the AHL last season on a per-game basis, just an offensive force. Excelled as a power play quarterback, great on breakouts, joins the rush as a fourth forward. Defensively, his performance waxes and wanes with his effort level. My bigger concern, though, from him are a lot of rumors over a long period of time of him just being a crappy teammate and not great in the locker room. Now, have we ever seen anything definitive come out? Not really. But this is one of those things where you don't see stuff come out about a player in that aspect ever unless it's something kind of everyone knows is an open secret. We're seeing a lot of smoke. It's not seeing an actual fire, but it's enough and has been happening long enough that it concerns me, especially with some of the rumors coming out of Ottawa and Belleville. However, on the ice, I expect him to be, again, a top AHL defenseman.
Next up, our projected top 4 defenseman for Charlotte, John Ludwig. Won't appear on highlight reels anytime soon, but Ludwig is a grinding defenseman who is effective in his own end. Not afraid to throw the body, separate guys from the puck. He doesn't chase hits, though, but he does occasionally get into penalty trouble. Big question of whether or not his offense translates. He's not a bad skater. He's not a bad puck mover. He does lack standout qualities on the offensive side. He has good awareness and hockey IQ. Hasn't gotten a ton of ice time due to injuries. Only 16 regular season games in the last 2 seasons. But like we said, if he stays healthy, he's projected to be in the top 4 for the Checkers this year.
Lucas Carlson didn't get much time in Charlotte before Florida called him up, where he was kind of rotated in and out as their number 6 defenseman. Didn't get a bunch of ice time, but still, got in there, got NHL paychecks, and that's probably the biggest benefit. Carlson should provide a bit of offense from the blue line, though. He's an average skater. Puck skills are around average. His playmaking vision is pretty good. He has a good shot, though, but often shoots from distance when he can make a better play with the puck. His best quality, though, is his high hockey IQ. He's aggressive jumping into the rush. He's willing to take chances coming off the blue line to keep possession in the offensive zone. Defensively, he's just okay. He defends the rush okay. He's capable in-zone defender. But he should just mostly be another member of a rock-solid Checkers blue line this season, but is also likely on the short list for Panthers call-ups, given that that's what he was last year.
Lastly, in the defensive core for Charlotte is Kalle Helene. Helene has a solid skill set that was on display in Europe. The question becomes, once again, how much does that transfer? Some definitely will. He activates into the cycle and into the rush. He's been solid in the defensive zone against both the cycle and the rush, and he's overall been a smart player. But the rink in the AHL is a lot smaller, and the game is more physical. And most of his raw skills are around average. Is he still able to make those smart plays that he did in Europe? I think so, but there's definitely a path where he struggles this season, I think.
Some other notables that are on the roster. Let's start with Saren Noel. Big body that can skate well for his size. Another prospect that has a good set of tools, but a limited toolbox. NHL caliber skating and shooting, but struggles to turn that into offensive output due to his inability to overpower defenders at pro levels, which is how he kind of created offense at the junior level. He's also not the best at reading the play and trying to see moves ahead and anticipate where he needs to go next. But there's another case where we could see a breakout here if he's able to, find more toolbox for those tools. But his chances at that breakout feel a lot lower than other guys on the list. So that's why he's in the other notables section.
Yeah, the last of this section, another notable for Charlotte, is Justin Sordif. 87th overall draft pick in 2020. Has a solid all-around game. He's a good shooter, good playmaker, defensively responsible. He does have some battle to him. Typically, his skill set looks to transfer well, but his skating makes me question how he'll adjust to the pace of the AHL from the major juniors game.
Let's move on to the puck-stopping voodoo makers, the goaltenders. Let's talk about Alex Lyon. Backstopped the Wolves to a Calder Cup. Was good in the Calder Cup playoffs, but didn't regularly steal the show. was good in the regular season once again, but wasn't really in awards contention at the end of it. He's going to miss the opening weekend for serving a suspension at the end of the playoffs, which is an automatic 2-game suspension for obscene gestures during the Calder Cup celebration. But overall, Lyon has solid fundamentals, good puck tracking. His athleticism is good, but not great. Still, he's a very reliable, above-average AHL starter, and I expect him to give the Checkers good, but not great goaltending.
Backing up Lyon is Mac Guzda. He's an undrafted player coming off of a unremarkable OHL career, has size and decent-ish athleticism, struggles with his glove hand and rebound control. He has potential, but it wouldn't shock me to see him struggle. Unfortunately for the Checkers, none of the goalie options behind him are more appealing. Chad Johnson is an ECHL caliber goalie, and Evan Fitzpatrick likely is too. So with all that said, what are your overall loose thoughts on the Charlotte Checkers, Sean?
It's a little bit hard to know what to make of this team. Carrick, Fleury, Prisky, Cholowski, and Olofsson are gone. That's 4 of your top 5 defensemen from last season. True, Wilson, Schwint, Lind, and McCormick also gone. 5 of your top 10 forwards. Joey Decord and Spencer Knight are gone. Nash, Mayhew, Michael Delzato, and Alex Lyon are big boosts, but it's hard to see the additions and subtractions and not see the Checkers as a little bit worse off here. If the Panthers prospects like Denisenko, Ludwig, Heponiemi, Hotsko, Sarah Noel can make significant steps forward, then those gaps can be filled, if not overfilled. That's possible, but it's hard for me to bank on that as an outcome. I think they're still a competitive team in Charlotte, but I don't think they're going to be in the place they were last season, where in the last week or so of the season, they're, duking it out for the division title. Unless you see the Utes make a big stride forward, a capital B, big stride forward. Otherwise, I think they'll be, a clear playoff team, but not one that's running teams over.
All right, moving on to the next squad. We're going to talk about the Springfield Thunderbirds, the Eastern Conference champions from 21-22. Their record that season, during the regular season rather, 43-33, good for second place in the Atlantic last year. Coaching staff, head coach Drew Bannister, 98-115 as an AHL head coach, 1 AHL playoff appearance, 3-1 in AHL playoff series. Assistant coaches are Jordan Smith and Daniel Kachuk. Did I say that right?
Yep. Not related to the other Kachuks.
Not related to the other Kachuks. I've seen that name, but I just have never pronounced it. And okay, it is like the other names. So Sean, let's talk additions and subtractions.
Some additions here: Braden Guy, Anthony Angelo, Matthew Highmore, Dylan McLaughlin, Martin Firk, Will Cranley, and in net Vadim Zherenko. Some subtractions, big losses here: Dakota Joshua, Double Mac, Mackenzie McEachern, Mitchell Balmus, Tanner Kaspic, Sam Anas, James Neal, the real deal, Michael Kim, and Chucky Sideburns himself signed a nice NHL deal with the Washington Capitals. So he is Sir no longer appearing in this film.
And speaking of Sir no longer appearing, Sean wrote a nice little player profile for Josh Levo. However, he is up with the St. Louis Blues, so we had to nix it, and he is Sir not appearing in this film.
Sent down, but most
paper transaction
that I read, that it's a paper transaction. So if he does end up actually being in Springfield, that's a big boost for them, but we're not counting on it as of this moment in time.
Right. So top 6 forwards projected. We're going to start with Dylan McLaughlin. Really like this signing from Springfield. I was kind of surprised that Rockford let him go. He's a do-it-all player who could create offense while being saddled with line mates like DJ Bustecker. DJ Bustecker. More specifically, he was one of the few on Rockford last season who didn't need to be paired with Lucas Reichel to produce offense on an Ice Hawks team that relied on Reichel and McLaughlin to score. McLaughlin skates reasonably well. He's a decent forechecker. He's got good playmaking vision and plays respectable defense as well. I think he's going to have a good year in Springfield, especially if someone like Nathan Todd or Martin Firk is on his wing.
All right. Let's talk about Will Once Bitten. Good news is that Bitton came alive in the playoffs and found ridiculous chemistry, forming the identity line with Dakota Joshua and Mackenzie McEachern. Bad news. That was the first time Billy Bitton really took a big step forward as an AHL player, and both Dakota Joshua and Mackenzie McEachern are gonzo. Joshua is in Abbotsford, McEachern is in Chicago. Bitton has always had a good skill set, though. He's an above-average shooter. He has good skating speed. He's a high-motor, hard-working player. But until this past Calder Cup playoffs, he really struggled to put that together effectively and find chemistry with teammates. Can he build off that strong finish last season to turn into a solid top 6 AHL forward consistently? Springfield certainly needs him to this year, that's for sure.
All right, to a guy that pretty familiar in AHL circles for the past number of years, Martin Ferk. Mentioned him earlier. Spoiler alert, Ferk's best skill is shooting the puck. No surprise there. Some things never change. But at the AHL level, he's more than just an A-plus trigger man. He can also drive possession through the neutral zone. He can crash the net and pick up rebounds. He's able to use the threat of his shot to open up passing lanes as well. He's not going to back check much or give you anything beyond lip service in the defensive end. But when you're a point per game forward, I think that is forgivable. That's okay.
This has got to be a make or break season for Hugh McGing. He's 24, has a 1-year deal that very much feels like a prove we should hang on to you deal for St. Louis. He has a solid skill set, though. Higher end skating, good playmaker, especially off the rush. And he's not a bad shooter either. But he hasn't been as effective using his skating on the forecheck. He struggled with puck protection and gets muscled off pucks easily. There's a solid AHL foundation here. But if he doesn't show this season that he can be more than just a guy with potential, I think it's unlikely that he ever will. And this could be his last season as part of the Blues organization.
Next up in the forward core, we're going to talk about Matthew Pekka. Big breakout year from Matthew Pekka. He is currently recovering from off-season shoulder surgery, but he'll be looked to for offense in Springfield when he's recovered. But the question becomes, can he sustain it with Anas and Neal gone? I think Pekka comes back to earth a little bit, but he's still a useful top 6 AHL forward, and he's got the skill set there too. He's a decent skater, good puck skills, above average playmaking vision, good defensively, and can win battles at the net front or along the wall. He doesn't shy away from contact either, so that's a plus. I don't think he's going to score 23 goals again with Anas out of town, but he should be a solid part of this offense regardless.
Let's talk about Nathan Todd. A bit of an underwhelming season from Nathan Todd in 21-22. However, he was hurt a good bit and did put on a solid playoff performance. Not a great one, but a good one. He's still at his best when he's just being a trigger man, shooting pucks that are, put right in his wheelhouse. He has good puck skills and playmaking vision, though, so he's not just a one-dimensional offensive player. He's not a great skater, but he's not a bad enough skater where it really holds him back. I'm hoping for more of a bounce back year from Nathan Todd where he can put 20 goals on the board because I think his skill set is capable of that.
All right, moving over to the defensive core. Top 4 projected here from the Calder Farmstead. Of course, number 1, we're going to talk about the captain, Tommy Cross. Another dependable season from Cross in 21-22. And while he's 33, I don't expect much to change. Surprisingly effective skater, above average playmaker, solid shot velocity that can beat goalies from distance, solid defensively and physically too. He does take too many penalties. That is a knock against him. Occasionally, he'll take silly risks on breakouts as well. Still, clearly the number 1 defenseman, veteran leader of the locker room. He is going to wear the C again for Springfield this year.
Steve Santini's game is pretty simple. He's capable in transition, solid in his own end. Doesn't have good foot speed, but his edge work is above average. He's physical, but he stays out of the box, unlike Tommy Cross. But he doesn't do a whole lot on offense. 10 of his 16 assists last season were second assists, which usually indicates that they're not very repeatable. Meaning I don't expect another 18-point season out of him. Still, I think he's a good partner for a more offensive-minded defenseman who doesn't do a whole lot defensively. For example,
Cal Rosen. Rosen had a solid year for the T-Birds on paper. I still expect him to be a useful piece going forward. He has slightly above average playmaking skills and vision. He's good in transition. He's got above average skating skills. However, he's not that much of a factor 5-on-5. 14 of his 28 points were on the power play. All of those were second assists, which doesn't correlate well to future assists. I think Cal Rosen still is a good defenseman in the right role, but I think he was placed in that role often last season and benefited from guys like Annis and Neal, who were power play specialists. If he's asked to do more this season, I feel like he could underwhelm.
Last but not least, this is a hard one to kind of, figure out who rounds out the top four there, but we're going to go with Matt Kessel. And he's kind of an odd prospect. He's really a very average at best defenseman, even projecting to the AHL level. His skating is not that great. He's not much of a playmaker, doesn't have exceptional puck skills or hockey IQ. Defensively, he feels like he's more likely to chase the play and chase hits than anything else. He really only has one NHL level skill, and that is shot velocity. The man can fire missiles. Should he make any progress in the rest of his game, he could be an okay number 4 defenseman for the T-Birds on a team that doesn't have a ton of depth on the blue line.
Let's talk some other notables for the Thunderbirds. First off, Nikita Alexandrov. This season is likely to define where Alexandrov goes in his hockey career. He has those raw tools, solid puck skills, good shooter, above average playmaking vision, but his game has struggles despite that. He doesn't have good puck positioning, or positioning off puck rather. His skating keeps him from playing with pace. If he's going to make an NHL push, he needs to find the score sheet more often this season. Another 30 points in 67 games is fine for an AHL middle six guy, but will not endear you to NHL coaches and general managers.
Let's talk about your friendly neighborhood first-round pick from 2020, Jake Neighbors. Interesting skill set from him. He's a respectable but not a great shooter. He's an above-average playmaker. He's good at maintaining possession down low and continuing the cycle. I like his defensive game. It's solid. He throws his body around. He's a high motor kind of player, but he's also an effective big body at the net front, but his skating is an issue. His off-puck details and positioning also need some refining. There's talent in Jake Neighbors' skill set, but we'll see how he adjusts to playing, in his first full pro season to see how those talents actually translate.
And the last for the other notables is going from one field to another. From Bakersfield to Springfield, we're going to talk about Dmitry Samorukov. Samorukov, again, coming to Springfield on a 1-for-1 trade for Klim Kostin. Samorukov ended the season with Bakersfield on the IR with a shoulder injury, but appears to be ready to go now. His skill set in the offensive zone is a work in progress, however. His puck skills and playmaking vision are somewhere near AHL average. He is a decent shooter. He will occasionally activate off the blue line, but not always at the best times and kind of infrequently. Samorukov is best in transition. He is very capable at making turnovers and dump-ins into plays going the other way quickly and efficiently. He's shown capability in his own end and will take away time and space with pressure and often finish plays with body checks. His skating is a concern, though. He struggles to defend speed on the rush. Overall, he has some upside, but I don't have high expectations for him on either side of the puck.
Let's talk voodoo. Let's talk goalies. A man featured in our own intro, which is new for this season, Joel Hofer. Hofer has a lot of things to like about his game that seemed to come together last season in the Calder Cup playoffs. He's always been a bigger goalie with decent athleticism and tracks the puck at a high level. But he has definitely lacked focus at times and will occasionally let up a low danger goal because it just seems like he's not quite as dialed in as he needs to be in that moment. But he does find his angle well enough. However, he does play deeper in his crease than I'd like, even for a goalie of his size. I feel like if he came out just a little bit further, he would help reduce some of those low danger goals that kind of squeak through space on him.
And once again, with Charlie Lindgren heading over to the Washington Capitals organization, you've got Hofer and you've got Colton Ellis. Ellis had a decent junior career, but last season very much did not go well. Unspectacular year in the ECHL, and he was bad in AHL games, the 6 AHL games that he played, rather. solid athleticism, can make big pushes to get post to post. A lot of busy movement in his game, though. Doesn't always track pucks and play well. He is young, and with better resources in Springfield full time, he could improve. It looks like Hofer should be taking the vast majority of the workload here. Don't be surprised if it's like a 60-40, 70-30, maybe even 75-25.
I'd be surprised by 75-25, but yeah, somewhere in that neighborhood. All right, let's talk overall loose thoughts about the Springfield Thunderbirds here, because our plan is to do one big show at the end where we talk about our projections and where we think each team is going to, end the season points-wise. So this is more of a loose kind of a dialogue about the whole team. And a lot of what powered the Springfield Thunderbirds that finals run is gone. Annis, Neal, 2/3 of the identity line, Chucky Sideburns, gone. Now, the additions of like Ferk, possibly Josh Levo, but probably not, and McLaughlin I like a lot. And they can fill the voids maybe left by Annis, Neal, McEachern, etc. Can we see Bitton and McGing take steps forward in their progress to kind of fill those gaps? It's possible, but again, I don't count on that kind of development as automatic. I think Hofer can make a leap, but I think this team is worse off than they were last year as a whole. But they should still be a competitive team. The one thing that I think can shift that in a big way is if the Scott Brunovich Pain Tour commences. Doug Armstrong, for whatever reason, decided he wanted to re-sign Bortuzzo and Mikkola, and he traded for Mikkola and re-signed Nick Leddy. There may not be a spot in the Blues for Perunovich when he comes back from injury, which is absolutely insane to me, but not out of possibility. If you look at the way their cap situation is and the way their roster breaks down, they don't have to waive Perunovich. They'd have to waive one of their other depth defensemen to bring him up. So there's a chance that we could see the Scott Perunovich Pain Tour Volume 2 this season in Springfield after he recovers from that offseason surgery. And if that's the case, then obviously, that changes the dynamic of how good this team is, because Scott Perunovich is a murderer. So if that happens, very different outlook. But I don't know how likely that is. And what's in Springfield right now is good, but I don't think it's as good as last season.
Better watch out if he gets the band back together in Springfield. All right, moving on to the next team. We're going to talk about the Providence Bruins. 21-22 team record, a very even keel, 36-36. Third in the Atlantic Division. Coaching staff, Ryan Mujanel, 36-36 as an AHL head coach. Only one season? Yeah, one AHL playoff appearance. 0-1 in AHL playoff series. His assistant coaches are Trent Whitfield, and Matt Thomas. Boy, sorry, assistant coaches. Still shaking off the offseason rust. Moving ahead, Sean, let's talk additions for Providence.
In additions, we got Joseph Abate, Luke Toporowski, Vinny Lettieri, Kai Weissman, Chris Wagner, shocker, Nick Foligno, bigger shocker, biggest shocker, Mike Riley, as well as Connor Carrick, Dan Renouf, Fedor Gordeev, Ryan Mast, and the blockade himself, Keith Kincaid.
Subtractions, Ian McKinnon heading over to Coachella Valley, Stephen Fogarty, Jesper Frodin, Cameron Hughes, also heading to Coachella Valley, Ty Lewington, Aaron Ness, Blake Hillman, Cody Curran, and Troy Grosnick saying adios, going to Lehigh Valley, I believe, in the Philadelphia system. So,
correct.
Yes. Let's talk top six forwards for the P Bruins. Sean, start us off.
Well, let's start with Vinny Lettieri. He's likely to be the first veteran call up to Boston when they need someone, although because Nick Foligno is going to screw their cap up. I guess he's really going to that's wild. So Vinny Lettieri likely the first call up to Boston when, they need a veteran guy who can fit under their cap. However, while he's in Providence, he should be an offensive weapon because that's what he's been at the AHL level. He's got NHL level puck skills and playmaking vision, but he's a much better shooter. However, he doesn't usually get the shot volume that would lead to more impressive goal totals. Defensively, he's not going to give you that much, but he's a solid offensive piece and can anchor a first line in the AHL, so defense need not apply.
Next up, let's talk about Jack Studnicka. It's shocking to see Studnicka slated for Providence again, but hey, here we are. I thought he was going to stick with Boston but no, not the case. At the AHL level, Studnicka is a do-it-all first-line player. He can make plays or finish them in the offensive zone. He can kill penalties. He's responsible with the puck. But what he is best at is his work rate. When he's on his game, he's someone that's going to be in the action at all times, pressuring puck carriers and making plays. He should be an offensive play driver again for Providence this season. Yeah, obviously a first-line shoo-in.
All right, let's talk about Oscar Steen. Steen finally had that season his skill set always said that he could. Scored at a 22-goal, 51-point pace last season. Got 20 games with the Bruins. He's always shown flashes of higher-end playmaking vision and puck skills, but never shown that he could be more than just those flashes. And then he found that consistency last season. There's a very good chance that he's going to miss time this season to call-ups, and an outside chance he gets called up by Boston and doesn't come back. But for while he's in Providence, I think he can build on last season and be a point-per-game player.
Next forward in our top 6 projection for Providence, Jakub Lauko. Jakub Lauko, I'm assuming, has played through injury last season or was playing through injury because he was visibly bad. And I struggle to believe he's actually that bad. Lauko's game is built on speed. He's got a top gear that few in the AHL can match, but that's really about all that separates him from the pack. His other offensive tools are around league average, and he struggles with consistency. Assuming he's healthy this year, he'll look to bounce back and show that he's more than just a speedster.
Let's talk about John Beecher. Beecher is basically answering the question, what if Jakub Lauko was meaner? Because Beecher can fly. He might be faster than Lauko. And he's physical too and will lay the body. The problem is the rest of his game is worse than Lauko's. His shooting, puck skills, and awareness are probably slightly below average. Hopefully he's managed to make progress on those during the offseason and develop. But regardless, when he's on the ice, you will know. He'll be the wrecking ball flying around like a madman.
I would love to see that. Well, we can't wait. Well, it's coming up soon. Last but not least, we mentioned him a few times in regards to cap space and everything, Nick Foligno. Another surprise to see in Providence, but again, here we are. Foligno is on the P Bruins. And Foligno is a grinder. He's not the most talented player, but he should bring enough offense to the AHL level to be in the neighborhood of a point per game. Most of that is from an above AHL average skill set, and he's got a hockey IQ that comes with over 1,000 NHL games played. I expect Foligno to be a physical, offensively capable, 200-foot veteran in Providence this season. Again, also providing good leadership to that young squad with his veteran experience.
Let's talk defenseman here. And you can't talk defenseman in Providence without talking about Jack Ashon. I've been a big fan of Jack Ashon since he came into Providence in the bubble season. Excellent skater, moves the puck well, defends his blue line with poise. He can kill plays in zone with his stick. His attention to detail is downright impressive. I would like to see him weaponize his skating and offense abilities more by joining the rush more often, as I feel like he dialed that back a bit last season instead of going full speed ahead, pun intended. I still think he's the clear-cut number one defenseman in Providence, though, and is probably going to get some time in Boston if they, can clear enough cap space.
Next up, contracted with Seattle last year, playing in Charlotte last year, but now under the Bruins umbrella, Connor Carrick. Carrick is a solid veteran blue liner. He's not going to light the world on fire with his offense by any means, but he has enough to be considered a respectable power play guy. He's not a bruiser in the defensive zone, but he will throw his body around. He's not a shutdown defender, but he can get the job done in his own end. He's not excellent in transition, but he can move the puck well, beat forecheckers, and start breakouts. Most of all, he's consistent, and you know what you're going to get out of him game in and game out. Solid defensive addition for the Boston organization. Obviously, Providence is going to benefit.
Let's talk about Victor Berglund. For a brief moment. Not a terrible season from Berglund last year, but an underwhelming one for sure. Not much progress in terms of his development. He has offensive skills, but they're limited to really shooting and passing from the blue line. He doesn't really flex any more, offensive muscle than that. Defensively, he's a hard worker, but he takes a lot of risks in transition and doesn't have the skating to catch up if he gets burned. And that's kind of been the story of his time the last season or two. He has skills. He's a lot more, as we've said a couple of times already, more tools than toolbox. And if he can maybe make some progress in that, we could see a better Victor Berglund, but I'm not counting on it.
Lastly, let's talk about Mike Riley. Hey, look, another surprise entry, because Riley may not be in Providence long, or given his contract and Bruins cap space, he could be a P-Bruin for the season. So, yeah, Boston's got to get a handle on that, no doubt. But back to Mike Riley. At the AHL level, Riley should be a do-it-all defenseman with a lot of offensive upside. He has well above league average puck skills and playmaking vision. He skates well enough and will join the rush. He's a strong puck mover in transition as well. His shot is well above AHL average too. Big surprise there. He should in all cases look like a defenseman that really doesn't belong in the A for as long as he's probably going to be in Providence this season.
Let's look at some of the other notables on the roster. Let's start with Sammy Asselin. A decent season from the Ass Man, but not one that I felt like he took a big step forward. His game is mostly as a playmaker. He has good puck skills. He can find teammates through traffic. Skating is just average, though, as is his shot. Based on the roster, it looks like he's likely to see a bigger role this season, and he could shine in it, especially if he can find chemistry with a sniper and get them the puck.
Another notable skater for Providence, Fabian Lysell. Like many others in Providence, Lysell has capital S speed. What's more impressive is that at his top speed, all his moves are still available to him. He is truly an elite puck skills kind of guy, and he's also a dangerous shooter. His problem, though, is getting tunnel vision. He'll miss spots to exploit the defense with passes or drives to the slot because he gets locked down on narrow vision. He's worse than Russell Wilson on the goal line. So, yeah, I said it. I went there. I'm not throwing any punches there, or not sugarcoating that. I'm throwing punches. Anyway, back to Lysell. That's something that should work itself out over time, the narrow vision as opposed to more, broader vision on the ice. But yeah, I wouldn't count on him being an impact player for Providence right away.
Last on the list of notables here is Michael Callahan. He played a few games for Providence after finishing his NCAA career down the road at Providence College. He's probably the most interesting defenseman left on the P Bruins roster. He's got a decent toolkit, around league average on offensive skills, average shooting, average playmaking vision, average puck skills. Solid work ethic on him, though. Still a project player as he has tools, but again, mostly tools, lack of a toolbox. He's not careful enough with the puck, too. Prone to some mistakes and turnovers that were avoidable, and that's a level of puck management that a coach at the professional level will definitely yell at you for. He could develop to be somebody interesting, but right now it looks like he's going to stick as a bottom pair defenseman who could work his way up.
Let's talk the Voodoo Kings themselves, the goalies. Keith Kincaid coming over from the New York Rangers organization, playing in Hartford. Happy Gilmore mask aside, what to expect from the blockade is kind of tough. It was a tale of two seasons, really, with Kincaid. He started last season on fire. .941 save percentage in October, but from December 19th to the end of the season, .893 save percentage. I suspect he was probably playing through some injury happening here, especially in March when he looked downright awful and was, quite frankly, a liability in net. To his credit, the team in front of him did him absolutely no favors. However, this could be Father Time catching up to him. He is 33, which is ancient in hockey days, and definitely not the peak of his career anymore. A lot of how Kincaid does this season feels like it comes down to his health and how much he has left in the tank. If he's healthy and motivated, I don't think it's unreasonable for him to finish with a .910 or .915 save percentage, which isn't spectacular, but it's more than serviceable. It's league average, a little bit above that. Well, and if he's not, then yikes, watch out.
Backing up, or at least playing a 1B to his 1A, is Kyle Kaiser. Up and down year last year for the usual suspects, but I'm really glad that limp of his cleared up at the end. Kaiser showed some development in his game last season, and I think he's likely to push for more playing time this season, especially if Kincaid falters. Kaiser has good athleticism. He tracks the puck well. His movement still gets busy at times, but it's improving. Overall, I think he could be an interesting goalie this year who could maybe have like a mini breakout, but I think there's a better chance he builds on last year and then next year is the breakout year for the usual suspect.
To finish up with Providence here, some overall loose thoughts. I think the team might be worse than last year. The forward group should end up with about the same results despite big differences in composition. The D has talent, especially with the surprise of Riley coming down. The biggest question for me is in goal. Troy Grosnick carried Providence through some lean nights when injuries and call-ups raided the roster. Now, can Kincaid and Kaiser, the double Ks there, hold the fort down if and when that happens? I think so, but certainly not to the same degree. There are also some surprise NHL veterans on this team, like we've chronicled, which makes me wonder how long that they stay. Their tender, the goaltending, and how guys like Lissell, Callahan, and Beecher handle the AHL pace and physicality, that's going to determine the outcome of this team. I do think it'll go fairly well, but I'd be surprised if they're in the hunt for a division title in the closing weeks.
I also just realized, too, Kyle Kaiser and Keith Kincaid, both double Ks, so their goalie room is 4K.
Oh, high definition. Hey, nicely done.
All right, let's switch over and talk about the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. In 21-22, their team record was 35-41. That somehow was good enough for fourth place in the Atlantic Division. They have a full coaching staff this year. They're no longer a poverty franchise. Head coach J.D. Forrest is 48-60 as an AHL head coach, one playoff appearance, 1-1 in AHL playoff series. Their assistant coach is Kevin Porter, and their newly hired assistant coach, Sheldon Brookbank. Hooray for monies.
Hooray. Although we do have a team coming up that doesn't have two assistant coaches.
Poverty franchise. Let's talk additions and subtractions. CC, take it away.
Let's do it. Additions: Jordan Frasca, Tyler Sekura, Ravis Onsons, Brooklyn Kalmikov, Drake Kajula, Clay Hannes, John Lazat, Xavier Ouellet, Mark Friedman, and Ty Smith. Subtractions: we've got Casper Bjorkquist, Michael Chaput, Justin Almeida, Jan Drogs, Felix Robert, Anthony Angelo, Jordy Bellarive, Yuso Ricola. Last time we get to say that. Tear. Cam Lee, Matt Bartkowski, Will Riley, Louis Domingue, and Alex Dorio. Whew, that was quite a few. Well, let's talk about the guys that are still here. Top six forwards, as we predict them, for the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins.
Let's talk Sam Poulin. While his scoring totals didn't stand out, his offense from junior largely looked translatable. He's a battler who can win pucks off the wall. He can drive to the net. He showed solid playmaking skills and shooting ability last season. However, he still doesn't show a lot of the layers you'd want to see. He's not looking off goalies, getting them to think pass and then shooting. He's not setting up moves. He's very much what you see is what you get, which is fine, but it doesn't necessarily lend itself to a player who's a good AHLer that sees more than a cup of coffee in the NHL. Now, Mike Sullivan's been very high on Sam Poulin in the offseason, but it's hard to parse out which of that is coach speak and which of that is, actual progress. Although I will credit Mike Sullivan for correctly using light years as a measure of distance and not time.
He cleared that bar in 12 parsecs at least. So, yeah. Moving on to the next forward, Valtteri Puustinen. Puustinen was probably the second best player on the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins last season, if not the best in terms of skill. He's got an impressive toolbox too. Above average puck skills, playmaking vision, and he can shoot. He was able to create something from nothing several times last year. The big hang up with him, it's his skating. It is tough to be a 5'9", 183-pound skater and be effective when you don't have at least above average skating speed or edge work. It's rough.
Let's talk about Nathan Legare. His first season was not great. Wasn't even good. But I believe that there's still a solid player in Legare. He still has a ridiculous shot. And yes, I'm aware he scored 7 goals last season. But I think a lot of that is because of how much the pace of the AHL overwhelmed him. His skating speed really held him back last season and frequently left him chasing play. Defensively, I think he's better than he gets credit for. If he can make strides in his skating efficiency, I think he could really blossom this season. But I think the floor is what we saw from Nathan Legare last year, and that there's going to be progress made. I think he's at least going to improve this season to be a better part of the top 6.
Next up, we're going to talk about Jordan Frasca. Frasca's an interesting one. He's got good puck skills. He's a decent shooter. He knows how to use his frame to protect the puck and set up others. His downside is one that will sound like a broken record for this team. His skating speed. It is a concern. It didn't hold him back in juniors, but we'll see if the AHL pace of play gives him trouble like it did with Legare.
I'll be honest, Philip Hollander is a coach's dream player, not because he's, an absolute weapon, because he can be relied on to play tough situations and come out ahead. Penalty kill, he can do it. Tough defensive zone matchups, done. Battling for tips and screens in the net front, check, check, and check. He's also an above-average skater, which is a rarity for this team, and can play with pace. He doesn't have the sexiest toolkit beyond that. He's not a great shooter, but he's not a bad one. Same could be said for his playmaking skills and his playmaking vision and puck skills. Because of that, he's a great passenger on a line with a more capable play driver, but he still provides value even if he isn't on the score sheet every night.
Lastly, we've got Alex Nylander. Frustrating coaches in yet another city. Last season was his most productive stint in the AHL on a per-game basis, and yet he's still just a frustrating player to watch. He has unquestionable skill. There's no doubt about that. Great puck skills, can dance around defenders. He's a solid shooter, but he gets tunnel vision at times, and he'll take entire periods of games where he just floats around. Like, he could take the puck and go score, but man, the vibes just aren't right. He's got an NHL caliber toolbox, but an ECHL caliber consistency and work ethic that does not balance out to a AHL player, or at least an effective one. You gotta have at least an AHL caliber work ethic and consistency, but alas, he does not.
CC, no evaluations, just vibes.
Sorry, just vibes.
And the vibes and the defensive core look a little different with Pojo out of town. Congrats to him for making the big Penguins, but it definitely leaves the cupboard not as bare as last season, but wanting. Let's talk about it a little bit. Let's talk Xavier Ouellette. One of the stalwarts in Laval for a handful of seasons there, comes over to the Wilkes-Barre Scranton Penguins. Good puck-moving defenseman in the AHL, creates offense, but very much in the old-school way of creating offense as a defenseman. Doesn't come off the blue line and join the cycle. Not a guy who's going to activate a lot. Doesn't join the rush that often. His offensive outputs come from second assists on breakout passes and plays, from the blue line in the offensive zone. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I think that's what keeps him from taking that step as a, 40-ish point defenseman to a 55 or 60 point defenseman in a season, is his maybe inability or unwillingness to activate more often and be more aggressive.
Next defenseman, Ty Smith. He is one of the few solid skaters on the roster. He can use that speed to beat forecheckers and get up ice to start breakouts and rush attempts. He's also a solid puck mover too, which is an element that was missing from Wilkes-Barre Scranton last season outside of Pojo, like we mentioned. Smith's biggest flaw is in the defending. He's smaller, not physical, and while he is a good skater, he doesn't close on plays and kill them before they develop.
Let's talk about Jack St. Ivany. St. Ivany plays a pretty simple game, blessed be thy name. He's big, physical, and incredibly capable defensive defenseman. He has some good puck-moving skills in transition, some offensive upside, but he's likely going to be paired with more offensively aggressive partners as well, as he's a righty, and guys like Ty Smith and Xavier Ouellette are both lefties. So that seems like a better fit for him.
Lastly, John Lizotte. Lizotte is a physical defensive-minded defenseman. In his own zone, he's looking to throw his body around and grind forwards down. With the puck on his stick, you're not going to see much creativity or offensive aggressiveness, as he prefers safe passes and glassing out to wingers in the neutral zone. I think he pairs well with one of the more offensive-minded defensemen in Iowa.
Scranton. Yep, sorry.
Yeah, he was in Iowa, but now he's not. Yeah. Getting caught in last season, he's going to be pairing well with a more offensive-minded defenseman in Wilkes-Barre Scranton, as well as a penalty killer. What are some other notables from this WBS Penn squad, Sean?
Well, one of the big signings recently that was a little bit of surprise was Tyler Sakura. Despite a promising 2021 season in the bubble, Sakura looked very much like the same player last year that we saw in Rockford. An above-average skill set and has good but not great playmaking vision and puck skills. He's an above-average skater but lacks kind of that separating gear for him. His shot is fine, but it's more quick release and accurate than it is hard. Defensively, he's around league average as a forward. He's another middle six kind of depth scorer that can get some power play time, but I think that 2021 season we saw in the bubble where he looked like he was ready to take the next step was just a mirage.
Ooh. Next up, Lukas Svikovsky. Svikovsky is a sniper. He's not a physical grinder. He's just okay as a playmaker. He doesn't have blazing speed, and defensively he doesn't do a ton, but man, can he shoot. If the WBS Penn staff compare him with a solid playmaker, they could have something on their hands here. So keep an eye out for Lukas Svikovsky.
Last is a surprise waiver, Mark Friedman. He's notable in the sense that he's played some NHL games, but he's more of a rough and tumble defensive defenseman who's an agitator and will drop the gloves if necessary. He has some offensive upside and should chip in some depth scoring from the blue line. All in all, though, I don't expect him to be too impactful, but because he was kind of a surprise send down, I figured we should probably talk about him. Decent puck mover at the AHL level, but he's going to be more of a physical, competent defenseman in his own end.
Time to talk about that voodoo that they do, hopefully so well, the goaltenders. First, Dustin Tokarski. Tokarski brings a winning pedigree, having been part of teams that have won 2 Calder Cups, a Memorial Cup, a WHL title, and World Junior Gold. It's quite a trophy case for Tokarski. He's been a reliable starting AHL goalie for the majority of his career, and he still has solid athleticism, but the crux of his game is technical and less based on athleticism. He tracks the puck well and gets to his angle quickly. That keeps him from getting behind the play and leaving shooters extra space as he catches up to the puck.
In limited action last season, I thought Philip Lindbergh actually looked pretty strong, but an ankle injury ended his season prematurely. He's a very technically sound goalie, decent athleticism, very good puck tracking, but he struggled in the past with making saves when chaos is happening, though. He's an interesting goalie. He's going to be in the mix this season. It's hard to kind of tell which, who's going to be the starter and then who's going to be the 1A, 1B behind him. So we're actually going to cover 3 goalies, which is one of the few times in which we'll do that in these season previews. Cece, talk to me about the other voodoo practitioner in coal country, Pennsylvania.
Yeah, Joel Blomqvist. He isn't quite there yet, but he could very easily be a goalie of the future for the Penguins, the Pittsburgh Penguins, that is. He's currently playing over in Liga with Karpat. He's 20 years old, so we may see him maybe towards the middle or even later this season if the Pens need to send up the flare and call him back over from Europe. Blomqvist does most everything well. He moves well, he tracks the puck well, solid athleticism, doesn't let a bad goal bother him, which I think is obviously huge for netminders. Some maturity and development does need to happen here. Again, 20 years old, but he has all the makings of a future NHL goalie, and he might get that shot in Wilkes-Barre Scranton this season.
All right, let's take a kind of overall loose look at the big picture here. Once again, we're going to do our season predictions with point totals and all that stuff a little bit later on in the week because I still have to build that model to make that all possible. So let's talk about some just loose vibes here. One of the big problems the Penguins had last season was puck movers from the back end. Nabbing Ouellette and Smith certainly helps that puck moving depth. Without Pojo, though, I'm not sure it's going to be enough. I think guys like Tokarski and the rest of that goaltending room should provide them with serviceable tandem. If we can see some steps forward from guys like Poulin, Puustinen, Legare, and Hallander, I think this team should sneak into the playoffs if they can keep Smith on the roster and find a way to counter what looks like a very slow-moving offensive group. that's going to present a challenge for them, I think, throughout the season is combating teams that are just have better team speed than this Wilkes-Barre Scranton group does. And if they can pull that off, they should be competitive, but not overly so, I think. All right, we're going to take a break here. After the break, we will get to Hershey, Bridgeport, Hartford, and Lehigh Valley. If you're just here for an Atlantic Division team that is not one of those, thank you for stopping by. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening to us from so you get episodes in a timely fashion. Also, check us out on social media. Links to our social media and more can be found on our Linktree page at linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. We're going to pay some bills, run some ads. We will be right back. Stay tuned.
All right, 4 teams down and 4 to go in the Atlantic Division. Let's move on to the Hershey Bears. 21-22 team record for them, 34-42, 5th in the Atlantic Division. The coaching staff, we've got Todd Nelson, 309 and 252 as an NHL head or AHL head coach, 7 AHL playoff appearances, 10-7 in AHL playoff series with 1 Calder Cup win. So quite a hire by the Hershey Bears looking outside of the organization for this one. Assistant coaches, Nick Bootlin coming up from Kalamazoo and Patrick Weller. Those are your assistant coaches for the Hershey Bears. And let's talk additions. Sean, take it away.
Henrik Borgstrom, Bear Hughes, Henry Rabinski, Sam Annis, Alexander Fortin, Ryan Scarfo, Matthew Strom, Aaron Ness, Gabriel Carlson, Logan Day, and Michael Kim.
And subtractions for the Bears, Will Garber, Matt Molson calling it a career, Brian Pino heading over to the New Jersey Devils organization, Marcus Vella, Drake Grimshaw, Cody Franzen, Tobias Gesser, Michael Kempney, Eddie Wacow, and Phoenix Copley all heading out. Sean, top 6 forwards. I have a feeling it's going to be Sam Annis. It's
going to be Sam Annis. Sam Annis is the number 1 forward on this team. A shocking signing here, but damn if it's a good one. Hershey had quite the offseason this year. Annis is on an AHL deal, which means an NHL team would have to give him a new contract for him to get called up, which is surprising for Annis to sign an AHL deal, but it's awesome for the Bears. On the ice, Annis is an above-average player 5-on-5. He has high-end offensive tools, but is undersized and lacks the speed or edge work to really give him time and space to use those tools. The power play is a different story, though, and it's where Sam Annis is an AHL legend. Annis doesn't have to worry about creating space 5-on-4, as the threat of someone, always being open makes that space for him. From there, he can thread passes with godlike precision and set up open shooters for vicious one-timers at worst or tap-ins at the best.
Next up is Garrett Pilon. He's a good but not great. He had a good but not great season last year. Some of that was injuries, and some of it was injuries to teammates that forced him onto lines with guys who really weren't ready for those roles. Hershey once again looks poised for a deep run, and Pilon will be a part of that. His game is a solid jack of all trades, master of none. He's a solid skater, good playmaking vision, above average puck skills, above average shooter, defensively responsible, and hopefully he gets more time with line mates that can finish on the setups he gives them this season.
Another one of Hershey's forwards who got taken out by injuries, Mikey Scarbosa. He's back healthy now and needs 30 games this season to hit 500 regular season games played in the AHL. Scarbosa's game has evolved a bit over the past few seasons. He's gone from being primarily a playmaker to a more well-rounded forward. He's not shooting more often, really, but he seems to be choosing his shots better and looking to shoot from more high-danger areas more often. Defensively, he's not doing a whole bunch, but he's not a liability. And given that he can make the offense happen on this team, I think that's okay.
Next up is Michael Vecchione, another Bears forward, another story about injuries keeping them out of the lineup. Thankfully, he was in the lineup down the stretch for the Bears and managed to hold the fort down. Vecchione's game is mostly battling along the wall and at the net front. He excelled at keeping the cycle going below the goal line, as well as finding soft ice in the slot. He also added deceptive elements to his game that increased his production as a playmaker. Defensively, he's around average, but he wasn't a big part of the PK last season. Hopefully, a healthier and deeper Bears lineup this season means that Vecchione can continue to establish himself as a bona fide top 6 AHL forward.
One of the Capitals draft picks where they actually get the pick in the first round, Hendrix Lapierre, first and foremost, is a playmaker. He pairs that well with dekes and puck skills, using dekes to pull defenders out of position, open up passing lanes, and then slide the biscuit right across to their open teammate. He's especially dangerous on the rush, where he can pair his moves and vision with some pretty good skating. His shot isn't that scary, and he plays virtually no defense. And his preference to pass versus shoot occasionally bites him. That's one of the parts of his game that needs developing, is that he seems much more willing to make extra passes and try and set up guys for tap-ins, even in places where he very clearly should just shoot the puck. I actually got to see him at Capitals training camp, and there were bits and pieces of that on display. But I think he's going to dazzle with Hershey this season.
Well, we were going to talk about Axel Janssen-Fjallby. However, he got claimed on waivers by Winnipeg. It's written on waivers, claimed on waivers, but like off of waivers. I've always, envisioned you're claiming him off of waivers. But anyway,
he goes to Winnipeg where there are no parks, no bears,
no Wi-Fi. But hey, we're going to talk about Henrik Bjorkström. Bjorkström comes back to the North America after a season playing in Liga. Bjorkström has struggled to live up to the first-round pedigree he was drafted with, but he's still a useful player at the AHL level. He has a strong hockey IQ, got decent puck skills, can deke through lesser defensemen. He's not a very good shooter, though, and unlikely to beat goalies cleanly except in the most high-danger situations. His best skill is his playmaking vision. He can use the body to draw defenders and shield the puck, then find open teammates in dangerous areas. His skating isn't great, and I don't expect him to help with rush chances because of it. I don't expect much from him defensively, really at all. So,
defense is the defenseman's job. So let's talk about defensemen here.
Yeah.
Let's start with Bobby Nardella. Nardella is a good puck-moving veteran defenseman coming off another productive season in Hershey. And I like his skill set a fair amount. He's going to, jump in and join the rush. He's got good puck skills and playmaking vision. His skating is about average, which doesn't do any favors because he's a little undersized. Defensively, he's fine, but he struggles against more physical forecheckers. He should still be a top pairing caliber AHL defenseman this season with the Bears, but I would like to see a little bit of progress.
Next up, coming over from the Bruins organization last season, Aaron Ness playing with the Bears this season. And after barely playing in 2021 because the Yotes make bad choices, it took Ness a while to get up to speed with Providence last season. Eventually, he shook off the rink rust and he found his game. Even as age starts to catch up with him, Ness still has the essential parts of his game. He moves the puck well and can start to break out effectively. He knows how to quarterback a power play at a high level and won't just throw shots away, something that Hershey probably doesn't hurt to have. He defends well enough, and his skating is starting to decline a little bit, but I think that's okay as the rest of his game, it's going to age well.
Let's talk about Gabriel Carlsson. Likely to fill the role of first veteran call-up to the Caps when injuries strike, Carlsson is a stay-at-home defenseman. He's big and physical, but he won't chase hits, doesn't get into a lot of penalty trouble. Offensively, he manages the puck well and can make good first passes out of his zone, but that's it. That's pretty much it, yeah. He's not a good shooter. He's not a dynamic playmaker. Will rarely leave the shadow of the blue line or join the rush. He's also a lefty, which doesn't bode well for being paired with more offensive-minded partner like Ness or Nardella, as they're also lefties. However, I expect him to be a staple of the penalty kill and in late game 1-goal, lead kind of scenarios for the Bears.
Lastly, we've got Lucas Johansson. He's finally healthy for what felt like the first time in forever. Johansson has always had solid skating. He's able to speed past forecheckers and start the rush on his own. He also has good offensive instincts and can activate off the blue line. While his offensive toolkit has improved, his puck skills and playmaking vision are around AHL average, if not slightly above. He's not a great shooter, and I expect his goal totals to come back down. Defensively, his game has improved, but he's still a little shaky at times. Perhaps we'll see him take another step forward as he gets to play a second healthy season, but I think it's likely he's reached his ceiling as a solid but unspectacular second pairing AHL defenseman.
All right, let's talk some other notables here. The Bears roster is quite overstuffed, but let's try and keep it to one or two here. Let's start with AA Alex Alexiev. This is a big season for AA here. Last season of his entry-level contract. It's also his first time being waivers eligible. He's also starting the season injured. When healthy, though, there is a lot to like about his game, but there's also a lot that needs work. He's an excellent defender, especially in transition, using his size and range to shut plays down. Offensively, he shows flashes of higher-end skills and awareness, but his skating isn't great and he struggles to play with pace, which is usually what happens when you're gigantic. But that lack of pace leads him to bad turnovers and the scoring output that's merely okay. If he can put more of his offensive skills to use at higher speeds, he could be somebody to keep an eye on this year. And I will say, CC, I'm going to steal this one for you because I want to talk about Vincent Iorio.
Sure, go right ahead.
Iorio. I saw Vincent Iorio in camp for both rookie development camp and Capitals main camp. And I really liked what I saw from him at camp. He was incredibly physical without chasing hits. I mean, he was putting guys on the ice in dev camp. That's not something that happens. His end zone defense was impressive. He was constantly breaking up plays with his stick. He's got good offensive skills as well. Good in transition, making smooth first passes, not afraid to come off the blue line and join the cycle. He did seem to struggle with the pace of play a bit and occasionally made some sloppy turnovers in the face of pressure. That's likely to stick around a little bit as he enters his first season of pro hockey and adjusts to, the pace of play and playing against grown-ass men versus, guys who are just getting their driver's permits. But I was really impressed with him, and I think he'll be a solid defensive defenseman who has some upside for Hershey this year.
Speaking of upside for Hershey, you're going to take goaltending as well, at least the first goaltender. I have commanded it so. You're going to talk about Zach Fucale, and you're going to like it.
Sounds good. Another up-and-down season from Zach Fucale, but one that we kind of saw coming. We said last season in the preseason preview that his 2021 numbers were likely unsustainable and that he'd settle in as an average to above average AHL goalie. And over the course of the season, that's more or less what you saw balance out. He has the raw tools to succeed. He's got above average athleticism. He's a good puck tracker. He has good, goaltending technique, but he struggled with consistency, and that was on display again last season. To be fair, consistency is the one thing that separates a lot of average to above average goalies in the AHL from good to very good ones that are seeing regular NHL time. That can be Fucale this season, but will it? Time will tell.
The other side of the goaltending coin in Hershey, Hunter Shepard. And I'll be honest, I haven't seen enough of Hunter Shepard to be solid in my evaluation. My limited showings that I've seen of him in the ECHL and his numbers from the E look solid. The dozen AHL starts he's had look good too, neither of which tell me enough to say what he's going to look like with the 30-35 starts in the AHL this season. He is a bit undersized as a goalie, but he does have athleticism. He seems to be solid in puck tracking, but there's a lot of unknown and uncharted territory there. I think he could flirt with success this season at the AHL level, but honestly, you could send someone from the future, and whatever that person told me about Hunter Shepard's season, I would believe it. He was terrible and was sent back to the coast. Yeah, okay, I can see that. He stole Zach Fucale's starting job. I can see that as well. He was around league average. Yeah, that checks out too. I could probably see that too. Also, for the record, he was Emily Ingelnatsky's sleeper pick in Hershey this year. So I want to believe her. I mean, she is a trusted source here at the podcast, but I need to see it first for myself, and I haven't quite yet.
All right, let's wrap up Hershey here with some vibes, some loose thoughts. We're going to do our actual projections on another show at the end of the week that may get out on time on Friday, but may not. Sorry, guys. But let's talk some loose thoughts here about Hershey. I think the Bears brass saw what happened last season with the mass exodus from the starting lineup with injuries and call-ups, and did everything they could to make sure that doesn't happen again. They went out and made sure that they had better forward and defensive depth. So if those injuries and call-ups pile up again, they have AHL caliber guys ready to insert in the lineup instead of, rando ECHLers. Logan Day, Michael Kim, Jake Massey are likely their depth call-ups on D. Fortin, Scarfo, Strome, those look like extra forwards. That's rock solid for depth pieces for AHL call-ups. This team looks a lot deeper and more secure this season. Even losing Axel Janssen-Fjallby and Brett Leeson, at least for the time being, to waivers. I still think this is a team that is deep. They have talent. They have high-end talent. The roster is full. I think they can do damage this year.
Alrighty, moving on to the next team. Let's talk about the Bridgeport Sound Tigers.
There it is.
21-22 team record, 31-41, 6th place in the Atlantic. Coaching staff for the Baby Isles, Brent Thompson, 294 to 321 as an AHL head coaching record, 4 AHL playoff appearances, 0-4 in AHL playoff series. Lord have mercy.
Could you read that stat line again? What was his record in playoff? Just
0-4 in AHL playoff series.
And what was the overall record as an AHL head coach? It was
294 wins, 321 losses.
Thanks. That's all I wanted to know.
Okay. Only one assistant coach, as we kind of alluded to earlier, Rick Kowalski. Rick Kowalski, and the second assistant coach is not appearing in this film because they don't have one listed. The next coach that's listed on the website is Chris Terreri, the goaltender.
Now they are with one assistant coach.
Yeah. Pulling the Wilkes-Barre Scranton this year. Good luck, guys. Anyway, let's talk additions
to this roster because there aren't a whole ton, but there are some.
Yes.
Some prospects coming in the door. William Dufour, Ruslan Ishakov, Hudson Fashing, Ryan McKinnon, Vincent Sevigny, and Dennis Chalowski. They are losing Felix Bibo, Austin Zarnik, Cole Koski, and Mitch Van de Soppel. Compared to other teams in this division, not a lot going on here.
No, that's why I had you read both those sections because I'm like, well, that's very small. So let's talk about the top 6 forwards out of Bridgeport. Simon Holmstrom. Holmstrom put a lot of things together last season and finally looked like he could be a future Islander, New York Islander, in the middle 6 role at times. His playmaking vision and puck skills took steps forward last year. He would draw defenders to him, then slip the puck past them to open up teammates. He showed more tenacity in winning battles along the boards. His defensive game took steps forward too, and he should be a fixture on the PK this season for the, all right, Sean, Sound Tigers. All in all, it was a season he could build on and one he needed to have. So building on top of that should be good.
Finally making his transition to the AHL full-time this year, Aatu Ratu is a player to watch. Offensively, he's added playmaking aspects to his game because he used to be more of a pure sniper. Now he's a little bit I can do everything. His skating is also improved, but I don't know if I would call it good. It's average. He's also a physical player, but doesn't rack up unnecessary PIMs. Defensively, he's a bit below average, but he's not bad. It'll be interesting to see how he handles the faster pace of the AHL, but I think he should be fine and have a productive season for the Sound Tigers.
All right, next up, Andy Andrioff. Andy Andrioff plays probably the most grizzled old veteran game in the AHL. He's got an above average AHL skill set, above AHL average puck skills, playmaking vision, and shooting, but none of those really stand out. He's not a terrible skater, or a terribly good skater rather, but he's around average. He's physical, but not consistently. And when he wants to, he can dominate a shift or a period or a game and score. But he doesn't show the effort level to do that on a regular basis. And he won't show hardly any effort level towards defense, really. He's managed to tone down the unnecessary PIMs, though, which were a problem earlier in his career. But he settled into playing his game, and will likely score around a 50-point pace, I would guess. But the skill set is there for him to score a point per game pace, but the effort level probably just won't rise to that.
Mm. Hudson Fashing comes to the island of Bridgeport after 3 whelming seasons in Tucson. He's a slightly above average shooter who showed better playmaking abilities last season than he had prior. He's decent in transition, and his defensive play in the neutral zone is above average. I mean, I will give Hudson Fashing credit. He still scored one of the most dominant goals I've ever seen at the AHL level, where he just came off the bench, blasted the dude with the puck, took it, went in, and ripped a slap shot top shelf. So CC remembers exactly the goal that I'm talking about, don't you? Yeah.
Dude,
So
yeah.
at least Hudson Fasching has that to his resume. But all in all, he's a useful but not overwhelming second-line AHL scorer who should produce on the score sheet well enough, but probably not much more.
All right, a familiar face in Bridgeport, Chris Terry, isn't going to change anytime soon. What he does is what he does. He's a decent skater and a capable playmaker, but he's first and foremost a sniper who's good for a 30 to 35 goal pace basically every season until he ends his playing career. He's almost certainly going to lead the Sound Tigers in goals at the end of the season. Because of that shooting talent, he gets away with the bare minimum defensive zone effort that he puts forth. But again, when you're putting in 30 to 35 goals, you take that trade-off every time.
Yeah, it's very much a puck is in my defensive zone, I sleep. Puck is on my stick, awake.
Oh, wow.
Let's talk about Otto Koivula. A good bounce-back season for Koivula that saw him set career highs for assists and points in the AHL. I thought his skating took some small steps forward, and while it's likely never going to be a strength, it's at least trending in the right direction. That's all you can ask for. He continued to show off an above AHL level or above AHL average playmaking vision and puck skills, especially under pressure. I think he's more than capable of having another season with a 60-point pace and maybe getting some time in Long Island.
Alrighty, that's it for forwards. Let's talk the defensive core, the Blue Liners. And of course, first and foremost, we're going with Parker Wotherspoon. Not a bad year from Wotherspoon in 21-22. He's always felt like he's had a skill set to be a true number one defenseman in the AHL, but he never seems to take that next step in his game and go from being the mid-20s point scoring D to an upper 30s, low 40s scoring D. I think he has the skill set for it. He's got good playmaking vision. His skating is reasonably good. His puck skills are above average. He just seems to not wield those skills in the best spots. He also took way too many penalties last season, including a ridiculous number of 10-minute misconduct penalties. Never seen a player help his team by sitting in the box for 10 minutes, so that's got to be shored up. Overall, I like Wotherspoon, but if he's going to be more than a second-pairing defenseman with some offense, he needs to develop those areas of his game more.
All right, let's talk about Robin Salo. Oh, wait, hold on. I'm getting a message. Yeah, it's 4 hours past the deadline for final rosters, and actually it does turn out that Lou Lamoriello has Robin Salo on the Islanders. So, yep, leave it to Lou. Well, then I guess we're going to talk about Paul LeDoux then. A down season for Paul LeDoux in 21-22, but I think there's reason for optimism. He still has good playmaking vision and puck skills. His skating is still above league average. His shot selection is still a knock against him, even if he's a good shooter. AHL caliber goalies aren't getting beat cleanly on shots from the blue line very often, and LeDoux takes those shots far too often, and his goal totals dropped last season because of it. He's a veteran in his 30s now, so I doubt that his game evolves that much, but he should still be a useful second pairing guy. But because of his propensity to just try and clap bombs from 70 feet away, I don't think he's a good choice for power play minutes anymore.
That's fair. All right, next up, Dennis Cholowski. Cholowski has been a bit of a power play specialist at the AHL level. He's capable of distributing the puck and finding space for shots through traffic. He can create offense at 5v5, but that's never been his strength. He's a good skater with a hard shot. His playmaking vision and puck skills are inconsistently good, though. Defensively, he should be good at the AHL level, but he's had problems at the NHL level. Given the difference in skill and pace, though, I'm not very concerned with his play in the American Hockey League.
Last in the projected top four here is Grant Hutton. A better season for Hutton in 21-22. Offensively, he's a good skater for a guy his size. He's a big slap shot that's dangerous as a one-timer on the power play, but his offensive abilities that oppress pretty much end there. His puck skills and playmaking vision are around league average. He's effective in transition, especially skating the puck past forechecking pressure. Defensively, he's good skating, helps him defend the blue line well. In zone, defending the cycle, he's good, but not great.
Those are your defensemen. Let's talk a few other notable skaters on Bridgeport this year. Sam Bolduc, a flat-out not good year for Bolduc, who at best looked like his development had stalled. At worst, he looked to even go a little bit backwards. And yet you still saw some flashes where he'd lead a breakout or beat a first forechecker with his feet. You'd see slick passes here and there. And defensively, despite being bad early and often, you still saw those flashes. Great poke check on the rush chance, a board battle won, and a breakout pass sending play the other way. But too many times he wilted under pressure or made mental errors in defensive zone coverage. Bolduc is going to need a big season to put himself back on the map, as this is his last season on his entry-level contract. If he flounders this year, there's a good chance his time in the Islanders prospect pool is done.
Big prospect coming to Bridgeport, William DeFore. He's an interesting one. I think he could see some time in Long Island. His selling point is far and away his shooting ability, which is high end. However, I think there are questions about how some of his offense will translate to the pro game. There were definitely times in juniors where he just kind of overpowered smaller, not as developed defenders. But that's not going to work in the AHL against grown-ass men. His skating also isn't great, and his ability to play with pace in juniors wasn't impressive. If he can make strides in those areas, he could become an effective scorer in the AHL and beyond. But that's going to require some play style changes from him, and that's a big lift for a guy just coming into pro hockey.
Lastly, for these other notable skaters, Arnaud Durando. Durando actually looked reasonably good last season. I know Mitch Anderson from Eyes on Isles absolutely loves this, but Durando was quietly 5th on the Sound Tigers in scoring last season, and he did so by finding those flashes we had seen and turning them into a more consistent game for him. He even showed some physicality and willingness to take hits and give them. That's been something he actively was avoiding. Does he build off that season and press for a call up to Long Island or Belmont in this regard? I don't know if that's in the cards, but it's far from impossible.
Wait, is Belmont not on Long Island?
I don't believe so.
I don't actually know.
Yeah. I'll have to check while you're talking about goaltenders.
Yeah, let's talk about goalies while CC finds out if Belmont is on Long Island. I thought it was. I thought that was the whole point. But what do I know? All right, let's talk goalies. I genuinely have no idea why Corey Schneider signed this 1-year, 2-way deal. He's very clearly not going to make the Islanders roster unless there's an injury. According to Cap Friendly, he's made about $51 million in his career so far. He's 36. This is clearly closer to the end. The team in front of him in Bridgeport is more or less the same one that he had to carry kicking and screaming to a playoff spot last season and a playoff series win. I think he probably has something left to give. I mean, he's still technically sound. He still moves well. He tracks the puck well. He has good enough athleticism to get the job done at a respectable level or better at the AHL. But I don't know how much there is left in the tank, and I have to imagine that Father Time comes knocking soon here. There's probably just going to be a cliff that he just falls off, production-wise, not, Wiley, Coyote-wise. But regardless, he's in Bridgeport. He's going to be their starter of a tandem with very likely solid results, but it will not be easy.
And you being an Eastern guy, me being a more Western, living guy, you were correct. Elmont, New York is
Belmont, New York? It's on Long Island?
It is on Long Island.
Okay. I thought so.
Yes. Yeah. I just hadn't looked at a map apparently and checked it out, but kudos to Sean for being the Eastern-based correspondent and me being the Western guy. So anyway, let's talk about the second goaltender backing up Schneider. It's going to be Jakub Skarek. Skarek's full season in the backup role went not great. He was not given any help in front of him from the Sound Tigers defense, but he was still underwhelming in his own right. Skarek has good athleticism and good save selections, but his movement often looked rather busy. And he also misses his angle more often than you like to see. He is still young. There's work to do, but he's going to need to make strides forward, especially given that the defense in front of him is basically a carbon copy of what he had last season. Good luck with that.
All right, let's talk vibes here. Some loose thoughts. We're going to have our, formal predictions in another episode that'll probably come out later in the week. But the past 2 seasons, we've thought semi-highly of Bridgeport in our season previews. It always seems like they had enough talent to at least finish in the middle of a competitive division. I ain't buying it this season. I've seen this movie before. Very little about this roster has changed for the better. Corey Schneider is a year older. They still don't have a full coaching staff, and the coaches that they have do not impress me. Terry will score. Andrioff will chip in. Holmstrom might take another step. Atu Ratu might do some interesting things with William DeFore. But that's really it. I don't think this team is very good, as literally the team last year was not very good, and this one is mostly the same team, except it doesn't have Austin Zarnik on it. I think it really goes as far as 36-year-old Corey Schneider can take it. How far is that? I mean, he got a kicking and screaming to a playoff series last year, but like barely.
Godspeed, Bridgeport. We'll see how you do this year, but it's not looking good. Now, let's talk about a team that did make quite a few changes in the offseason, the Hartford Wolfpack. 32-40 was their record last year in 21-22, but yeah, they were 7th in the Atlantic out of 8 teams. They did miss the postseason after quite a free fall in the latter half of 21-22. Whew, quite a free fall. They were first place. They were first place in February, and then they dropped all the way down to 7th. That's how much of a free fall. Anyway, big changes, but not so much for the coaching staff. Chris Knobloch, 77-81 as an AHL head coach, 0 playoff appearances. His assistant coaches are Steve Smith and Jamie Tardif. Let's talk additions. Shawnee, take it away.
I mean, technically an addition. He was around in the bubble season, but Will Cooley is back. Matthew Rempe, Ryder Korzak, Adam Enstrom, Gustav Rydell, Ryan Lowen, Zach Jordan, Turner Elson, CJ Smith, Luca Hanot, Blake Hillman, Ty Emberson, Andy Walensky, Dylan Garand, Olaf Lindbaum, Parker Gahagen, and Spicy Pork Man, Louis Domingue.
Louis Domingue with the spicy pork. You gotta love it. Subtractions: Tony the Greek, Anthony Greco, Max Latunov, Mike O'Leary, Ty Ronning, Nick Merkley, Justin Richards, Anthony Botetto, Zach Berzola, Niles Lundqvist, Braden Schneider, the blockade himself, Keith Kincaid, and Francois Brassard. Also another goalie departing. Sean, let's talk about those that are staying and those that are projected to be in the top 6 forward-wise.
Well, first and foremost, there's Johnny B. Good. Johnny Brodzinski showed that he was the heartbeat of the Wolfpack last season. Hartford was 21-15 with him in the lineup. They were 11-25 without. 7 wins in their last 25 games without Johnny B. Good in the lineup. Brodzinski felt like his game took steps forward, though, last year, which is rare for a 29-year-old. His playmaking vision and puck skills are first-line AHL caliber. I thought his shooting was a bit better last season as well. He drives to the net. He finds soft ice in the slots. His skating looked improved last season, too. I still wouldn't call it good, but trending upward. Defensively, he's always been solid, but unspectacular. We'll see if he can once again, show out once again for the Wolfpack, or if the Rangers liked enough of what they saw to give him a full-time look on their 4th line. That last one seems unlikely, but, weirder things have happened.
Next up, we're going to talk about Tim Gettinger. Tim the Tower had another solid season with the Wolfpack. He's offensively capable and likes to play in the dirty areas of the ice. He has a good puck skill set and tight. Defensively, he's very solid and one of the better defenders as a forward in the league. His skating still holds him back, though. It keeps him from truly driving play and being able to carry a line on his own, which is what we saw directly. Evidence that late in the season with the Wolfpack, he just did not do well, basically captaining a line on his own, for lack of a better term.
Big addition this offseason is CJ Smith. His offensive game is solid, and he's been a top 6 contributor for the last 2 seasons in the AHL, wherever he's been. He has good hockey IQ, decent puck skills, his playmaking vision is solid, and he's a good but not great shooter. A lot of his goals, though, are from his ability to get on rebounds and finish plays around the net, as opposed to pure beating the goalie with a clean shot kind of snipes. He's a capable battler at the net front and along the boards. I don't think he's good enough to drive his own line, but I think he should be a capable forward when paired with solid line mates. Defensively, he's not great, but you could do worse.
Bobby Trevino. He may not start the season with the Wolfpack's top 6, but there's a good chance that he ends there. Trevino has an interesting skill set. Good puck skills and playmaking vision, especially in tight and under pressure. He's got an above average shot for an AHL forward. His work ethic is visible on the ice in almost every shift as well. I think it takes him some time to get used to the pace of the AHL from the NCAA, especially as his skating isn't great and he is undersized. But given the offensive toolkit that he has, I think he could be an impact player for the Wolfpack this season and have people saying, hockey? Trevino.
It was weird seeing Turner Ellison last year without his, trademark flow. On the ice, he plays a solid, two-way, do-it-all kind of forward game. Offensively, his strong point is skating, but more in acceleration and burst than it is top speed. His puck skills are about average. His playmaking vision is pretty good, though. He's a decent shooter, but the problem is that his shooting volume isn't very high. He usually finishes at about a 15-goal pace and not 20-plus because he just doesn't throw pucks on the net often enough. Defensively, he's good in his own end, mostly due to the high effort he puts in, though, as opposed to paying attention to details.
All right, next up, we've got Julien Gauthier. A somewhat surprising cut from the Rangers this season. Gauthier is a big winger with solid tools at the AHL level. He's a decent skater for his size. He's a talented sniper. His playmaking vision and puck skills are good, but not great. While he's never been terribly offensive-minded in the NHL, that seems mostly due to the pace of play being a tad too quick for him. I expect him to excel at the AHL and make the Rangers think about bringing him back.
Let's move over to the defensive side of the puck. Let's talk about Matthew Robertson. Last season, we didn't think that Robertson's offense would translate well to the AHL. Lo and behold, 1 goal, 11 assists, 12-point stat line. A lot of that stems from shot selection. He straight up shoots from places that he shouldn't. This isn't the WHL anymore, kid. You're not going to beat many AHL goalies cleanly by blasting pucks 64 feet away. And yet the rest of his game, I think, reasonably high of. He's good in transition. He's good in the defensive zone. He's physical, but doesn't take a lot of stupid penalties. If he can make better decisions with the puck in the offensive zone, I think he could take steps forward as a two-way AHL defenseman.
Next on the list, we've got Andy Welinski. He is an above-average offensive defenseman. Welinski's got good playmaking vision and puck skills. He's solid as a shooter. Shot selection, however, is not great, though. He will join the cycle off the blue line in the O-zone. Defensively, he's okay-ish, but I worry about him defending speed on the rush, as his skating isn't great, and I've seen him get burned one-on-one by speedy forwards. Andy Welinski still landing in the top 4 defensemen here for Hartford.
A surprise landing in the top 4 here for our projection, Ty Emberson. Because I'm sure people looked at Ty Emberson's stats from last season, and you make a face that's just, yeah, it's a face that, looks like you just ate a piece of cheese that expired 6 months ago. Yeah. However, I think there's more than meets the stat sheet. Me, the stat guy, is saying, let's look beyond the numbers. Tucson was, and likely still is, a tire fire. They had maybe 7 players in the whole roster who were AHL or better caliber talent, and a lot of guys that belong in the ECHL at best. They were outclassed almost every night across the board. And while Ty Emberson certainly wasn't always holding his end up, it's easy to look bad when your team is that awful. I think there's a middle pair defenseman out there who can maybe chip in 10 to 15 points on offense, but I think a fresh start with a more competent team will help his outlook tremendously.
As I often say at the AHL level, a change oftentimes does guys good, for sure. Hunter Skinner, last defenseman we'll highlight here. Skinner's heavy point shot is probably the best part of his offensive game. The rest of it is at or below AHL league average. In the defensive zone, he's a solid defender, but he struggles with defending the rush as his skating isn't quite up to par. He's young and will be given chances to develop, but I'm not too confident there's more here than what we saw last season. I'd love him to prove me wrong, though.
Let's talk about, some other notables around the roster here. Let's start with Ryder Korczak. When Korczak has the puck, no denying his skills. He can shoot, pass, and deke at an NHL level. What raises big questions are his size and his skating. He's undersized and not a terribly explosive skater, which can be fine when you're in juniors in the Western Hockey League, or when you're a college sophomore age, playing against high school sophomore age defenders. The AHL is full of grown-ass men. You may not have been aware, but it is. And how his offense translates to that level is where questions arise. If he can develop better skating, more explosiveness in his game, he can impress this year. If not, there's enough in his defensive game for him to still be a useful contributor, just not as a regular on the score sheets. We could also see him turn into a Sam Manis type player where he's a power play specialist, but isn't very effective 5v5.
Another notable player is Will Cooley. I was not a big fan of Will Cooley the last time we saw him in the AHL. He seemed to get frustrated easily and resort to stupid penalties and gooning it up over trying to score. And while he's always been physical, his penalty minute rate in his brief AHL stint more than doubles his penalty minute rate anywhere else. Cooley is a big physical winger. A lot of pure strength, a shot that explodes off his stick. He kind of reminds me a bit of Nolan Foote over there in Utica. Big, strong, good shooter, but has bad skating and struggles away from the puck. Nolan Foote, he's also a much defensive player. Cooley regularly cheats out of the D zone to try and get a step up on the rush. This absolutely drives coaches nuts. So we'll see if Cooley can maintain a little bit more discipline this season.
Both in his staying in the defensive zone and staying out of the penalty box.
Correct.
Lastly, let's talk about Lauri Pajuniemi. Pajuniemi, not a bad season for his rookie and North American debut. Showed off that rifle shot at times last season, but his lack of other skills kind of hurts his effectiveness. If he wants to take a bigger step forward this season, it's going to be developing some playmaking vision, better puck skills, working on his skating. His shot isn't good enough on its own to carry him anymore, and he needs to do more than just try and get open on the outside and hope that someone finds him.
All right, that's it for the Blue Liners. Let's talk voodoo. Time for goaltending. First up, Louis Domingue, coming over from the Pens organization. Domingue is probably one of the better goalies serving as a number 3 in the organizational goalie depth chart. He's good enough to come in and start an NHL game in a pinch and not be Swiss cheese. No, he's more like spicy pork. He's coming off the best AHL season in his career, .924 save percentage in 22 games with a surprisingly decent Wilkes-Barre Scranton defense in front of him. And yet I still have questions. Domingue hasn't been the most consistent goaltender across his career, which in part explains why he's bounced around so much. But he also hadn't played 34 games from 1920 till 21-22. He did so across 6 different teams between the AHL and the NHL. If he stays in Hartford for the majority of the season, will we get to see him get comfortable and be that same .924 goalie he was last season? It's a possibility. All the tools are there. He's got good puck tracking, solid movement, good enough athleticism, and we'll see if his stability and location will help him have another solid season.
Interesting prospects. Also, one thing about Louis Domingue, you could tell we're starved for personality in hockey when it's like a guy had spicy pork and that's an internet sensation in the hockey community. Mm-hmm. Like, don't get me wrong, I think Louis Domingue has personality, and apparently he like had a YouTube channel or like an Instagram account or some social media channel where it was like him making gourmet food. Like he actually can cook. But yeah, man has spicy pork and talks about it, and the internet goes nuts because that's how starved for personality we are in hockey. Let's talk about Dylan Garand. It's a goalie who I think is a shot to shine this season in Hartford. He's undersized by professional goalie standards these days, and occasionally that's hurt him as he doesn't have the frame to fill the upper portions of the net, but he's technically sound, he tracks play well, he has good athleticism, he's decisive in his movement. I think he takes a bit getting used to the improved shot quality in the AHL from juniors, but I think there's enough here that he could maybe break out.
All right, the vibes, as the kids say, are immaculate. It's time to talk about some loose thoughts. Overall, I like some of the additions. I mean, CJ Smith, Turner Ellison, Andy Walensky, Louis Domingue, all 4 of those guys, they're great veterans. The problem for me is that the Rangers have made it clear that they do not care about Hartford winning and will 100% grab important guys from the Wolfpack to sit in Madison Square Garden in the press box whenever they feel like it. They have enough talent in the top of the lineup, and the forward depth is solid. Defensive depth, that's where I start to worry, especially if the Rangers snatch Robertson. Otherwise, I think this team has some promise, but it's definitely going to be more of a grinding team that lacks pace. I think that keeps them as a firm playoff team, but it does limit their upside quite a bit.
All right. Last team in the Atlantic Division here. They finished last in the division. If you haven't caught on by now, we're going in the order that they finished last season. The 21-22 record for the Lehigh Valley Phantoms, 29-47. That was 8th in the Atlantic Division. Their coaching staff, head coach Ian LaPerriere, only 1 year. His coaching record is the same as the team record, 29-47 as an AHL head coach, no playoff appearances. His assistant coaches are Riley Armstrong and Jason Smith. Cece, talk to me about additions and subtractions. Who is not on this roster? Who is here now?
Well, some major changes and everything like that, but yeah, we'll get to it. Elliot Desnoyers, Zayd Wisdom, big addition for sure. Adam Brooks, Cooper Marody, another good addition. Jordan Bellarive, Adam Ginning, Louis Belpedio, Kevin Connaughton, and Troy Grosnick in net. Some subtractions, you've got Maxime Susko, Brendan Saulnier, Jerry Mayhew, Nick Lappin, Matthew Strome, Adam Clendenning, Ryan McKinnon, and Logan Day. Some departures, some additions. Let's talk who's staying. Let's talk forwards.
Well, I mean, the big one is Cooper Marody. He's currently injured, lower body injury, and is week to week, according to the Flyers. I'm assuming at some point he gets healthy. He's going to be on the Phantoms. When he is healthy, Marody is one of the AHL's best playmakers. He's a decent shooter, but he's better as a setup man than a trigger man. Marody's biggest concerns are his skating and defensive zone play. Straight up, neither are very good. But he makes up for that with what he can do on offense with his playmaking vision and his puck skills. His hockey IQ is high enough that he can get to the places he needs to be, even if he's a step slower in the foot.
Next, we have Tyson Forster. Man, rough season from him. Injury took him out, flat out. When he got healthy, he was sent back to the OHL for some reason. Production there was underwhelming for an overager. Forster has an average skill set paired with one standout ability. His puck skills are average. His playmaking vision and hockey IQ are average. And what sets him apart? It's his shot. He has a ridiculous shot. He can beat AHL goalies cleanly from distance. But he's smart with his shot selection and doesn't often throw pucks away with low-danger shots. His skating is what holds him back and what'll be what defines him and his ceiling as a player.
Captain Cal O'Reilly. Fun fact, did you know that he's the older brother of Ryan O'Reilly?
Oh, really? O'Reilly? Yeah. Oh.
Yeah. Fun fact for you right there. Cal O'Reilly's game as a playmaker is well documented. He's a talented playmaker, and that's about it. He's a good shooter, but doesn't shoot that often. Apparently, he doesn't hear the fans in the PPL Center yelling what he should be doing. His skating has degraded as he's gotten older, but his hockey IQ was high enough that he can see moves ahead and get to the spots he needs to be. If his wingers are able to still stay healthy this season, I think he could flirt with 50 assists and be in the ballpark of a point per game. He's always had that upside, but it's a matter of, when you're a playmaker, a passer, you need guys to put the puck in the net when you serve it up to them on a silver platter. And, well, Tyson Forster wasn't there last year. A lot of the other good shooters in that team weren't there last year. So some of those opportunities just kind of...
Yeah. Adam Brooks, next up. Everyone's favorite waiver claim finally looks to have a place to stay for more than a week or so. It's a bit hard to say what his game currently looks like, as he's only played a handful of games in each of those landing spots in the last few seasons. When he was a full-time AHLer, he was a solid playmaker with good puck skills. He had some shooting talent, but was best at pouncing on rebounds around the net. His skating wasn't great. He will get pushed to the perimeter regularly, which explains why he struggled to stick at the NHL level. Defensively, he's capable, but isn't great. I imagine it takes him a while to find chemistry and his game, but he should get it going and be a valuable forward for the Phantoms this season at some point.
Max Ullman spent half the season with the Flyers last year, which is great for him. But he didn't look great in the NHL overall. And I got the sense he was there that length of time more due to injuries than him, being an NHLer. And I've never been as high on him as others have as well. He has a good skill set. He's an above average skater. He shows flashes of higher end vision and puck skills. And that's kind of the problem. You see flashes from Max Willman that seem like they come out of nowhere. and he never really builds on those. They just kind of happen every third or fourth game or so, or he'll just dominate a game, and then he'll be a ghost for 10 days. And if he can start to find that consistency in his process and his output, he could be someone at the AHL level and maybe beyond. But that's the problem with this Max Willman's game right now. There's good parts to it, but they just don't happen close together.
Last but certainly not least, Zayd Wisdom. There's a lot to like about Wisdom's game, while also there being a lot to dislike. He's physical, he's got a work ethic that jumps off the page. He's likely going to be one of the best forecheckers in the AHL this season. He has good playmaking vision and puck skills. However, there are elements of his game that need to be refined. He doesn't have good puck management. He will force plays that are not there. He will try to deke through defensemen in situations that he shouldn't. His decision-making isn't the best, as you've probably gathered. He tries to push the pace to a very high speed, which is good, but the rest of his skill set is often unable to keep up with that. He's going to be a fan favorite for sure, but he also has some work to do on his game as well.
Switching over to the defensive side of the puck, number one defenseman for the Phantoms this season is likely to be Kevin Connaughton, a journeyman of the NHL and a veteran of 9 seasons in the show. Connaughton should bring veteran leadership to a Phantoms team that has a fair number of youths. Connaughton should be able to provide some offense off the blue line for the Phantoms this season. He's not a great skater, but his work ethic and hustle help power him to where he needs to be. He's going to jump into the rush, but more likely as a trailer because, once again, not the fleetest of foot. His puck skills and playmaking vision aren't great, but they're serviceable enough at the AHL level. He has a powerful shot, and his release and mechanics aren't great, but he's strong enough to kind of power it through. Defensively, he's above average, but he's going to struggle to defend speed. Again, skating kind of an issue. Given his NHL experience and skill sets, I expect him to be a solid but unspectacular part of the Phantoms' blue line this season.
Igor Zamula. Zamula is someone I haven't really been that thrilled with. He has a good skill set, but doesn't utilize it well. Again, all tools, no toolbox. He's patient with the puck, which is good, but he lacks consistency and struggles to play with pace on offense and on defense. Can he process the game at a faster pace? That is the $64,000 question. If Zamula is able to take the next step as a prospect in Lehigh Valley, it's going to be him finding better spots for his offensive abilities and being able to push the pace.
Louis Belpedio got off to a rough start last season with just 6 points in his first 23 games with Laval. Then he found his game around Christmas and put up 22 points in his final 45 games played. Belpedio's game is based off his skating, which is excellent. He has the speed to join the rush, make some very fancy plays through the neutral zone with his feet. Defensively, he uses his skating to shut down plays in the neutral zone. Despite his point totals, his offensive skill set isn't that impressive outside of his skating. Everything kind of checks in around the league average. He's physical, though, and will throw the body around, but he also takes a lot of penalties that are not advisable and loses his temper pretty quickly. If he can get some anger management sessions going, he can take another step forward in his game, but that's really the big thing that holds him back at this point.
Lastly, for the D-core, Cam York. Kind of a head scratcher here. I know we had a number of those with Providence and Boston, but not sure how Cam York's in Lehigh Valley, but again, here we are. York is NHL ready in the sense that he can play in the NHL right now, but there's more development to happen here for him to reach that ceiling that he has. I figured that development would happen at the NHL level and that they would just continue to run with that, but apparently the Flyers really want to play. Let me check my notes here. Nick Seeler. Then I guess they'll have to do that. All right. York has all the tools you want for a modern defenseman. He skates well. He moves the puck well, has poise under pressure, defends well, can set up the teammates, understands power play structures. He's got a lot of it. The only real complaint I have for York is that he seems to be a little too timid. He has top 4 NHL defensemen's skill set, but he doesn't use them to just murder the AHL in the way, say, Payne Tour Scott Perunovich did last year.
Let's talk about some other notables real quick on the roster here. The Phantoms have a lot of kind of interesting people, but we're going to grab 2 or 3 here to talk about. First, we have to talk about Wade Allison. Wade Allison is if the Batman villain Bane was an ice hockey player. He's a physically imposing agent of chaos. He's not crafty. There's no deception to his game. It's north-south sprints to the net with or without the puck. Shoot first, ask questions later. He gets tips and rebounds to the net front and has a preference to go to the hard areas and battle for pucks. Unsurprisingly, this style of play has led to a lot of physical wear and tear. He's played just 53 games in the last 2 seasons between the NHL and AHL. When healthy, he's a difference maker at the AHL level, but given his injury history and his, agent of chaos style of play, it's kind of hard to count on him, playing a full 72 or even, in the high 60s this season.
You play hard, you get hurt more often. Peter Forsberg can attest to that for sure. Tanner Lazinski. Lazinski had another injury-plagued season, which is starting to feel like an entry-level requirement for being on the Phantoms, unfortunately. I feel like he took steps in his offensive game as he shed a lot of the pass-first mentality, and he actually fired the puck on net. Oh, he's a good shooter, which is why that development was important. His skating is still kind of meh. Defensively, he's not doing much, but isn't getting torched. If he stays healthy, that's the big if, I think he can take some steps forward and deliver on the potential that's there, but it feels like a medium-sized if at this point. Maybe not as big as an if as I initially thought, but yeah, I'll dial it back a little bit to a medium-sized if.
Last but not least, let's talk about Zach McEwen. Apparently the Phantoms are just collecting power forwards. That's how they win the games, by having the most power forwards, because they have another in Zach McEwen. He's another net front battler with a solid work ethic. His offensive toolkit is above average. His puck skills and playmaking vision are good, but he's shown flashes of higher end abilities. He's got a nose for the net and can make plays down low, but his biggest drawback is his skating speed, which is well below average. And that makes it hard because the net is the furthest away from the offensive zone that you could be. So getting there and getting back takes some time.
For the decor, let's talk voodoo, shall we? Net minding, goaltending, whatever you want to call it. The goalies. First up is Troy Grosnick, joining from the Bruins organization. Grosnick has been a top-tier AHL veteran goalie at every stop that he's stopped at for the past 5 years. He more or less carried the Providence Bruins to competency in the latter half of the season when they were crippled by injuries and call-ups. He's 33, and Father Time will eventually catch up with him, but he has a solid enough foundation of technical ability and athleticism that I don't think Father Time makes too many gains on him this season. He should be an above-average starting goal in the AHL this year at minimum.
The other goalie in the room looks to be Samuel Ershawn. Ershawn is an interesting prospect. He missed almost all of last season with a groin injury, but he has a skill set that lacks a standout feature and is mostly in the neighborhood of league average. He does seem to get in his head a bit at times when he lets in a bad goal. He's young, so that's something that can be ironed out. His lack of playing time in North America also leaves a lot of questions about what he's going to look like. And it wouldn't shock me to see him struggle a bit early on as he shakes off the rink rust and adjusts to the speed and pace of the AHL again. Now, that's all the players in the roster. Let's talk some vibes here quick. As we are clocking in a little long today, but, we covered 8 teams. I feel like we did a pretty succinct job of summing everybody up here, but let's get this going. Vibes on the Phantoms roster, as again, our big prediction portion of the, show or the previews is going to come later in the week. This Phantoms roster looks like they should be more competitive this season. The forward depth looks good. Their defense looks good. There's AHL level talent top to bottom if you squint at it a little bit. Grosnick should be solid for them, but my concern with the Phantoms this year is threefold. Number one, can this roster stay healthy? History has said no, but staying healthy isn't a skill. It's a randomness that happens to you. Number two, the Flyers are pretty obviously going to be hot-ass garbage this year, and you could see them taking extended looks at guys like Forrester, Wisdom, Marudi, Zamula, York, etc., and, kind of testing the waters with them at the NHL level and see a little bit of how they're moving along. 3, I have not been impressed at all with Ian LaPerriere in his brief time as the head coach here. A lot went wrong with this team last season, but I don't think a lot of the choices he made were good ones. If you can learn from those as a first-time head coach, the Phantoms can move forward. If not, he might drag the roster I otherwise kind of like down to places in the standings it doesn't really belong.
Well, that'll do it. That's all 8 teams from the Atlantic Division. 1 division down, 3 to go. Boom,
that's so
son.
many divisions.
It is. It really is, especially when we get to the last one. 10-team Pacific Division.
All right, no players, just vibes. That's the
No players, just vibes.
Yeah.
But hey, for the Atlantic Division, that will do it for the show. Thank you for watching and or listening. The Calder Farmstead is part of the Full Press Radio Network. You can listen to this and several other great hockey, sports, and pro wrestling programs at www.fullpresscoverage.com. Just click the podcast drop-down menu in the top right portion of the website. That's the big list of podcasts populating, and enjoy. And of course, with all the great programming out there, both Full Press and otherwise, thanks a bunch for joining us and making us a part of your day or night.
And if you guys are enjoying the Calder Farmstead, please make sure you subscribe so you get episodes in a timely fashion. This season preview isn't going to do you much good if you're listening to it in November. Also, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or Amazon, please leave us a rating or a review. If you're watching on YouTube, like the video, comment what you thought of the episode. And I mean this seriously. Doing so helps others find the show. When you search for AHL Podcast, it populates mostly by reviews and ratings. If we have more of them from you guys, more people can enjoy the show like you do. You can also follow the show on social media at Calder Farmstead on Twitter, at The Calder Farmstead on Instagram and Facebook. Links to all of that and more, including the AHL TV packages that we're giving away on social media. Yeah, that sounds like fun if you want to win free AHL TV. If you're still listening, thank you. That can all be found on our Linktree page at linktr.ee/The Calder Farmstead. Big thanks to Adrian Drake, who made our brand new theme music. You can find him on social media at AD_dysfunction. That's AD_DYSFUNCTION, so he can make music for you too. Cece, where can people find you?
Well, my name is CC Hockley. You can find me representing Full Press Hockey on Twitter at FPC_AHL. My personal Twitter account at CCHawk. That's SEESEEHAWK. Mostly tweeting about hockey. Big surprise there. But hey, I've got other interests too, like pro wrestling, classic rock, you name it. Hopefully, if it keeps me interested, it's not going to be bullshit for you. Check out my writing on the Full Press Coverage Network at www.fullpresshockey.com, as well as the other AHL staffers and NHL staffers there. But I digress. Sean, where can the people find you?
I'm Sean O'Brien. You can find me on Twitter at Sean O'Brien81. That's SEANOBRIEN81. I'm also on Instagram at Sean O'Brien_81. It's hockey season again, so I'm doing the rest of my jersey collection for Jersey of the Day over on Instagram. You can find my stats work, which has not yet started for this season, as this season has not yet started, but last season's up there over on Tableau at bit.ly/data-dump-and-chase. All lowercase, all one word. Cece, take us home.
That will do it for episode number 112, the Atlantic Division preview for the 2022-23 season. For Sean O'Brien, I'm CC Hockley, and as always, keep your stick on the ice.